Hello, my name is Purge Productions, and today I will be debunking the second video I made a long time ago about how the Empire is morally better than the Republic. I have since grown a lot as a content creator, and so I'm going to debunk the crap arguments I had then. You don't need to watch the video I made debunking the first video, but it's in the description if you want to, and you definitely should if you haven't seen it already, because I think it's a pretty good video.
Hello everyone, my name is Catnap, and this is part 2 of my Why the Republic Sucks video. In the first part, I talked about why the Republic is corrupt, linked in the description to the first part, but now I'm going to talk about why the Galactic Empire might be less corrupt than the Republic. George Lucas has said that in the past that R2-D2 is the one who tells the story of Star Wars, and it's common knowledge that R2-D2 is a rebel, so from his point of view, the Empire is the bad guys. So he would tell the story as if the rebels were the good guys, and he might over-exaggerate the bad parts of the Empire.
This is the classic idea of history is written by the victors, and it ties into a real quote from George Lucas about how R2-D2 is the narrator of Star Wars. But I see two main problems with this argument. First, R2-D2 is said to only be the narrator for the 9 films in the Skywalker saga. This is key because then we can only say that R2 was putting his perspective into those 9 films. Now, we could say that theoretically, maybe some of the other parts of Star Wars were being told by characters who were part of the rebellion, who were at least sympathetic to the rebels. But more likely, the stories of Star Wars are like flashbacks, where even if somebody is telling us what happened, it's not what literally happened. There's a lot of times in media where you'll have something and they say, okay, this is told by this character. But what we actually see on screen is what actually happened. And the idea of it being told by another character doesn't actually play into the story.
Now, maybe that's too little for you, but I have more. Star Wars media seems to suggest that everyone hates the Empire, but people still join the Empire. And even after the Empire fell, many stayed in it.
First off, people can do bad things without agreeing with it. A lot of times people agree to things because it's the best opportunity they have. And to the argument of after the Empire, people stayed in it, this boils down to the fact that some people did benefit from the Empire's control. For example, you've got Vardos, right? A thriving planet. But for every example of a planet thriving under the Empire, you have tons of planets who suffered. Plus, a lot of people who stayed in the Empire were just too scared to leave. Finally, most people did leave after the second Death Star was destroyed. The desertion rates go up a ton after the Battle of Endor.
Some people use the excuse that people only enlist to get away from whatever backwater world they came from. That would also mean that they would rather be with the Empire than live where they're from.
Just because a government offers opportunities does not make it good. There were definitely places in Star Wars that were not safe to live, and the Empire, while offering employment, did little to change the living conditions of these places or root out the root causes. Not to mention a lot of the examples of people enlisting due to bad conditions were due to the Empire causing those conditions.
Another reason civilians liked the Empire is because it provided safety from pirates and crime families, as well as provided opportunities for employment and technological improvement.
The Empire did provide safety. It was really all about safety, but safety through control, and in doing so, they greatly reduced the freedoms people have access to. The conflict between safety and freedom has been discussed for a very long time, and it can be attributed to Thomas Hobbes. Really, a government needs a mix between safety and freedom. That's what we have in the real world, for the most part. And the Empire did not have a good balance. It was almost entirely safety with very little freedom. On the note of employment, I did kind of just talk about that. But going to tech improvements, the tech we see being used in the Empire is more advanced than in the Republic, yes. But that also makes sense for the time. The Republic was in wartime, so there was a drive for tech improvements. When the Empire took over, they just continued that. If the Republic was still around, you'd still have tech improvements. Besides, with the Republic, you'd probably have better improvements that help a wider array of people. We know of a lot more Republic programs that were focused on clean energy and similar causes compared to the Empire, which was really focused on military might. For example, all the research the Republic did into kyber crystals under Galen Erso was about clean energy, and then the Empire came along and decided, hey, let's build a big super weapon that can destroy planets and whatnot.
And we know crime rates went down because a group of teenagers on Reddit a few years ago has painstakingly figured out the amount of arrests and amount of crimes registered in both the Imperial and Republic eras. Before, of course, the rebellion.
Okay, it's been a while, but I can't find the source. So I'm just going to ignore the supposed Reddit thread about crime rates, because either you fell for some clearly fake stuff, or you made it up. I do vaguely remember seeing a source like this, but I can't find it, and I'm 98% sure that it was probably just people on Reddit making stuff up. Plus, again, teens on Reddit are not a reliable source. Reddit is not a reliable source. The Empire was very strict with their crime, but there were also a lot more corrupt officers in the Empire compared to other galactic powers. This meant that a lot of crimes by the major syndicates would be allowed to exist for personal power and profit. This all stemmed from the Spartan-esque training system of the Imperial Academies. And to clarify, young Spartans would be punished for stealing in the academies, but not because they were stealing, because they were caught. And if you take a look at the first new Thrawn trilogy book, Thrawn, we see that the Empire teaches students almost the exact same way.
And then even film theory ended up checking out the theory. Furthermore, the novel Wedge's Gamble backed it up by saying the Empire was so large that it could never have been able to rid of all the crime, but they had at least been doing better than the Republic had.
Before I get to the source I provide, Wedge's Gamble, I want to talk about MatPat. Film Theory, as a YouTube channel, tends to build their theories off of what would produce the most entertainment value. What this means is that a lot of the theories are designed to make you think about things, but are not necessarily objectively this is true. In fact, a lot of the theories are incredibly unlikely, especially if you take a look at the FNAF theories he's got there, which are kind of crazy sometimes. So the actual video from MatPat that I was using is this video right here. And I also don't think the argument MatPat uses in that video are very good. So let's quickly go over all of them. Okay, so one of his arguments is against the problems with the Jedi, which is unrelated to the Empire's efficacy. He next claims that the Empire had better policy. He uses the words of the Tarkin Doctrine as proof of the positive policies the Empire had. The problem is that Tarkin, of course, can write something that sounds really good in his doctrine. He can say he wants to root out corruption and help out the lowly citizen, but it's really about what the Empire has done, not what they say they're going to do. So yes, maybe Tarkin was saying that he wants to help out the common person and do all of these great things, but if that's not what he's actually doing, it doesn't really matter what he says. Anyways, let's talk about Wedge's Gamble. So, in the quote from Wedge's Gamble that I provide, Wedge was talking about how the New Republic was struggling to root out crime, and that the Empire had managed to do that much more effectively. But this is in the context of the New Republic being created from basically nothing. It's not like when the Empire started from the Republic. This is an entirely new government. This is not just the same government being reshaped. Of course, they don't have everything perfectly put together.
One of the biggest things the rebels said was bad about the Empire is that they were ruling by fear and trying to control everyone. But many of the things they did, the US did at some point. For example, the chain codes in Bad Batch Season 1 are said to be bad, but that's basically the same thing as everyone getting a passport in the US. The only reason both exist is so they can know who enters and leaves a certain place. Or for instance, how the Empire is filled with humans who hate aliens. That's basically the same as racism in the real world, and that's not entirely the government's fault, even if it is not okay.
So what past me is misinterpreting here is that when people are talking about the bad stuff the Empire's done, the chain codes are not said to be an evil of the Empire. It was just something in the way of the Bad Batch that they were mad about because it was an obstacle in their way to escape the Empire. The real evils of the Empire are stuff like Alderaan, what they did to the Wookiees, what happened to Vardos. That is what people mean when they say the evils of the Empire. Those type of things. Not, oh, they just started tracking people a little bit more. For the racism and xenophobia argument, it relies on the idea that the US is perfect according to everybody. And most people are not saying that. The US has a lot of flaws. Racism is a major systemic issue, and it's also a systemic issue in the Empire. I mentioned that it's not only the fault of the government, but it really is, because in both cases, racism and xenophobia are systemic issues in the government. I don't want to talk too much about that specifically, because this video is going to get very long if I go on another tangent, so let's just move on to the next point.
I disagree with the ruling by fear argument because most of the people who had a problem with the Empire were people who came from planets that were very unlawful or weren't used to being in a strict government other than their own. For example, Alderaan. It definitely was not that strict as a government, so when the Empire came on, a lot of Alderaanians rebelled. So, some way, the Death Star destroying Alderaan wasn't great because there were Imperial loyalists on Alderaan, but there's also a lot of Republic loyalists who view the rebellion as good.
For the point about different planets and sectors not being used to strict governments, that might have been true, but there were still plenty of examples of the Empire violating their rights.
The Empire is also a better faction to the Republic because it stopped the bloated bureaucracy of the Senate and encouraged senators and local governments to hoard as much power as they could.
First, the hoarding of power is something that is way more encouraged with an authoritarian regime, and we see that in the Empire, especially with all the Imperial warlords in both Legends and canon after the fall of the Empire. If we want to use the most recent example, take a look at Mando Season 3, where Moff Gideon mentions how every single member of the Shadow Council is basically hoarding their own resources and forces.
That's right, yes.
And yet, we individually scrape and claw resources, awaiting the grand plan to take shape, while you and Peleon amass countless resources and equipment which should be shared.
Going to the bureaucracy argument, this is the main argument against democracy. And democracy, while having some flaws, really is the best system we've got. I don't spend too much time on this part again, as I talked a lot about this in the last video, and my opinions on how democracy, while flawed, is a better system than authoritarianism. So let's just move on once more.
The Empire also managed to stop corporations from becoming so powerful they could rival the government, which is the entire reason, basically, the separatist Clone Wars thing even started.
Yeah, because half of the companies were liquidized after the Empire took over, and they became government-controlled companies, or their leadership was replaced. And the real major companies that had helped the Republic also still existed to help the Empire. Also, there were still ginormous companies that controlled so much of Star Wars. It's just the most famous ones were the ones who participated in the Clone Wars, and they were the ones who were punished for participating.
Now, though the Empire has some very bad eggs in it, we also hear about many good Imperial officers such as Thrawn, Eli Vanto, Ray Sloan, and Ciena Ree, Thane Kyrell, and many others like them.
This argument, if we're using real-life context, is basically the equivalent of saying, we cannot fault Germany in World War II because there were some good Nazis. And just because you've got maybe a couple good people in an evil group doesn't mean the group isn't evil. It's still majorly dominated by evil, villainous people. Admittedly, the Empire not as bad as the Nazis, right? But they still did some really horrible things, and while maybe the average person in the Empire isn't that bad, doesn't mean the Empire as a government is good. Not to mention, the examples I use are not good. Half of the people there are people who come disillusioned with the Empire and leave it, and the other half is characters like Thrawn, who, while having good reasons, is still a pretty bad person in both Legends and canon. And while recently Timothy Zahn has done a lot to kind of reshape the character's legacy, he also of course did that in Legend as well, Thrawn is still a villain despite Timothy reframing a lot of his actions with good morals.
Okay, since this video is already getting long, I'm gonna stop it here.
Well, thank goodness for that, because I want to stop working on this video now. Except I also still have to edit it. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, as I would love to counteract the loss of 10 subscribers since the time I posted my most recent Andor video. If you're interested in that video or my first video on this topic, they're on the end screen now. Plus, please drop some video suggestion ideas in the comments below, because I have no idea what content I should be posting.